So welcome everyone to the fourth and final talk of our summer solstice Awakening the Heart retreat. We began on Thursday with the full moon, known as the strawberry moon in June, because of the ripening of strawberries in this fertile harvest season. How fragile that fertile abundance on a rapidly warming planet. We've been ripening along with the harvest, planted in the soil of stillness. As Henry put it, opening ourselves like a flower opens to the taste of stillness. Or as John Gaynor put it, listening, hearing, emptying, realizing, returning. A harvest of wonder. Late yesterday, a delivery truck dropped a book at our door, ordered before publication and forgotten. The title is Ordinary Wonder, a book of Joko Beck's teaching culled from recorded talks and published posthumously by her daughter. The first chapter begins. There is only one thing we need to know. It's utterly simple. Our job as humans who want to experience life fully is to pay attention when we experience something. That's what we've been doing these 4 days, cultivating awareness of what is. Just this. Now. What a wonder. Nothing else. And it is complete. Joko Beck's talk goes on to describe what constitutes experience. She says, and now writes, when we truly experience what we are, whatever it is at every moment, there is freedom. Then she offers, sometimes people say to me, oh yes, I'm in touch with who I am. I know my body is tight. That's not experiencing, says Beck. For one thing, when we say, I know my body is tight, we're already separating us, our knowing and our bodies. We are assuming there is an I knowing something else. The world is split. She goes on, when you are truly experiencing, you are not feeling the suffering or the anger. You are it. You're not feeling the suffering or the anger. You are it. She punctuates the point. Be what you are. Be what you are. When I took up this practice and went to a first interview with the teacher, he asked what I came to know was a traditional first question. What brings you here? without a thought, what leapt from my mouth was, I want to be my true self. Deeply longed for authenticity. Be what you are. In a way, it's a baffling longing. How can we be anything other than what we truly are? That's the crux, you could say, of this life and this practice. Who we truly are is the fabric of this moment. It's realizing us moment to moment. How do we find our utter, thoroughgoing continuity with it, our unconditional belonging, our native ground, intimate, authentic, right here, freely available, flowing with generosity, given, and taking everything away. No I, no me, no mine, no vehicle or mechanism for separation. How do we allow this emptying? Beck says, stop putting a thought on top of everything. Like that famous story about putting a head on top of your head. It's a lot to carry around. The Buddha said, stop and see. It's as if Joko is saying, stop and be. It's simple. So what then is experience? What is immediacy? What is your true, native, originally unencumbered self? And what difference does it make to see it? Today, as a way of looking into this, I'd like to turn to a koan about hearing and how that might include listening, emptying, realizing, returning. This is case 46 in the Blue Cliff Record, or Hekigan Roku, Kyose's Sound of the Raindrops. I wonder if it's raining where anyone is, all scattered around this globe. Sound of the raindrops. Here's the case. Kyose asked a monk, "What is that sound outside?" The monk said, "That is the sound of the raindrops." Kyose said, "People live in a topsy-turvy world. They lose themselves in delusion about themselves and only pursue outside objects." The monk said, What about you, Master? Kyosei said, I was on the brink of losing myself in such delusions about myself. Another translation, I almost lost myself. The monk said, what do you mean, on the brink of losing myself in such delusions about myself? Kyosei said, to break through. This translation has in brackets, into the world of essence. To break through may be easy, but to express it in total goneness is difficult. So let's look at this. Kyosei, or in Chinese Jingqing, was a disciple of the great Master Seppo. He also studied with Gensha or Wansha, another exceptional master, and he was a Dharma sibling of Unman. So his dates are 868 to 937. A very rich, dynamic time in this practice. There's a seed to this koan, an exchange recorded by Dogen, where a monk arrives at the monastery where Kyosei is abbot and asks for instruction. Please teach me. Kyosei responds, it's raining. Do you hear it? There is your gate. You know, please teach me, where should I enter? Do you hear the rain? In the koan, Kyosei's teaching is even more to the point, an arrow aimed right at the heart of the monk's problem. I want to study Zen. How can I enter the way? What is that sound outside? Inside, outside? Are there two? Where is the border? Where is the sound? What is the sound? Kyosei is showing it right here. What is that sound? The exchange resounds with Kyosei's own experience. Years earlier, he arrived at Gensha's monastery with the same question. As a student entering this monastery, I ask you to point me on the way. Gensha replies, do you hear that water flowing over the dam? And Kyosei responds, yes, master. Gensha says, enter there. What does it mean to enter the way through sound? What happens when you hear just one sound as it truly is? The 14th century master Basui guided his students to focus on a single question. You know, this is one of those other ways of using koans, these tools, these brickbats. Just one question, even if it's your whole life. The question that Basui gave most often was, who is the master of hearing this sound? This has come to be, in short form, one of the common so-called breakthrough koans, initial koans. Who is hearing this sound? Or simply, who hears? Who hears? Henry described the process of working with this when he spoke yesterday about listening and hearing. First, listening to sounds, like listening to moo, intoning moo, attending to moo, breathing moo. Then the gradual turn to hearing. As Henry put it, hands off the oars, the momentum is carrying you. Sound is sounding. Moo is mooing. You don't do anything. Henry described the raucous, rumbling calypso band coming into sync like liftoff. One body of sound. They're so vivid. Playing that riff. Who hears? What if there is nothing but sound? Total absorption. No one there. And yet, a voice, a fan, the call of a bird, the sound of rain. John Tarrant has a piece about who hears circulating out in the web world for quite some time now. He writes, when the sound takes you over, it shifts what you are. There isn't much left that is what you think you are. When there is just sound in the universe, he asks, what is it like to be me? Is there even a difference between that sound and me? And if this is true for sound, how about for the old wooden fence bright with green winter moss? You don't either agree with the fence or disagree with it. And what about when I look into the eyes of another person? There is also nothing to have an opinion about there. And then if we come to sorrow or anger, it is the same. You are not fighting it or agreeing with it. He writes, it is just the brightness of life. When the sound takes you over, what then? Kyosei asked a monk, what is that sound outside the gate? The monk said, the sound of raindrops. Kyosei said, living beings turned upside down are deluded to themselves and pursue objects. Oh, It's so tender. This practice is such a gift, and at the same time, already realized, already whole, already okay. Come home to this moment, this one boundlessness. And where is there anything outside it? What object would you pursue? The monk said, "How is it for you, Master?" Maybe this monk is really asking about himself. Or maybe he's challenging, turning the question. Kyosei says, "I almost became deluded to myself." Yeah, I was on the brink of it. So gentle, so generous. Kyosei takes up the language of inside and outside to guide the monk. Risky business, almost. The Shinjin Mei, or verses on trusting the heart mind that we've been quoting, has a line. Most of you know it. If there's only a hair's breadth of difference, it is the distance between heaven and earth. If there's only a hair's breadth of difference, deluded to yourself. There are two. But is there any difference? Can there be? Can there be any distance? Whatever you pick up, it's whole, complete, one, and it's all. The monk asks, "What does it mean to say, 'I almost became deluded to myself'?" Kyosei says, "Although it should be easy to become one," slightly different translation, "to leave oneness can be said to be difficult." Although it should be easy to become one, so natural, so native, to leave oneness can be said to be difficult. To see it and leave it, to experience this total oneness and see that it's completely empty. Another translation, the one we heard before, to break through into this essence, break through, fall into, drop into this oneness may be easy. Here we are. But to express it in total goneness is difficult. Kyosei is freely showing it. I almost became deluded to myself. That's it. There is no other emptiness than this. Exactly where you are, as you are. Exactly this. And yet, as Henry said yesterday, as soon as we think, that's it, wrong, gone, takes care of itself, can't hold on, can't stay around. Such freedom and dynamism. There's a famous verse or waka associated with this case, this koan. Scholars, some attribute it to Dogen. It may have been rewritten with slight variations by other masters, even as a kind of tribute. Here's a translation of the version thought to be by Dogen. Seeing with ears and hearing with eyes, there is no doubt that the jewel-like raindrops dripping from the eaves are myself. Seeing with the ears and hearing with the eyes. Kanon, Kuan Yin, Kanzeon, the Bodhisattva of great compassion, is known as the hearer of the cries of the world. Hearer, such that hearing and heard are one reality without the slightest gap. The name Kanzeon actually translates as the one who sees the sounds of the world. Sound is the eye. Eye is the hand that reaches out instantly, immediately, responding to suffering. The heart of compassion, one, whole, no hindrance. As the Heart Sutra puts it, no hindrance of mind. Nothing there to impede anything. And yet, compassion pouring out. Here's a version of the poem by Yasutani Roshi. Just listening, body having no self, the raindrops falling from the eaves of the house are nothing if not myself. Just listening, body having no self. That dropped away. Body. Dropped away mind. Another book recently came in the mail, such riches. This one very used. I heard about it. It's called Women in Search of the Sacred. And the first chapter is an interview with Sister Elaine McGinnis Roshi. Just read a very short bit of it about her experience of this body having no self. And this is written by the author who interviewed her. Elaine had the experience of everything dropping away, the fruit basket without a bottom to it, and afterwards felt everything had changed. The nothingness transformed her. And when she saw the world in relation to that nothingness, she felt, quote, the most firm oneness with everything you could ever experience. It took her back to a time in her childhood when she and her sisters were ill and her mother came into the room with 2 thermometers on a tray. Elaine managed to break both of them, and started to play with the 2 pieces of mercury. To her great interest, they jumped together. Years later, when she experienced Kensho, she felt the same sensation of the nothingness and the universe suddenly going wham together. This is quoting. And it was absolutely now. Absolutely now. Such capacity. Mumon points to the discovery of this one true body in his commentary on Mu, very short. But let all the delusions of a lifetime go, all the understanding and insight, and slowly, little by little, nurture the simplicity of occurrence appearing of itself, like sound. Mumon writes, soon inner and outer are a single tissue. What is that single sound? One student recently called it a vanishing spectral ringing, here but everywhere, me, we. This one sound, a single tissue, intimate, immediate, this world, this moment, this experience. So I'd like to close by sharing several passages, just taking this time, from a book that I recently rediscovered. Some years ago, I quoted from it in a talk during an extended retreat, and a participant at that retreat went home and bought the book. Just last week, she read from it in a short talk for MKZC here in Dallas. So we're coming full circle. It reminds me of that iconic quote from Dogen about this circle of the way, this practice, this continuous, sustained, never cut off. Dogen writes, between aspiration, practice, enlightenment, and nirvana, there is not the slightest gap. Continuous practice is the circle of the way. So the book is called Every Day, a Good Day. 15 lessons I learned about happiness from Japanese tea culture. It's by Noriko Morishita. It starts when Noriko is 20 years old in college, a bit of a renegade, and her cousin asks if she'll go together with her to tea lessons. Noriko thinks that tea is all about rules and customs and fitting into a mold. And she's really not interested. She just doesn't, she resists. It's not her thing. But she ends up going because her cousin really wants her to. So here's the first bit. She writes, in essence, tea is nothing more than making a single bowl of tea. But this simple act is governed by so many rules. Which foot you use to enter the tea room, and how many steps you should take to cross a single tatami, where to put the utensils relative to the ridges in the weave of those rush mats, how deep into the cast iron kettle you should dip the bamboo ladle to take a scoop of hot water, even the height from which you should pour that water. Every little movement must be molded to fit the prescribed form. At first, I felt terribly uncomfortable as I tried to squeeze myself into that mold. I would ask my teacher about why we did something, but she would never explain the reason, merely telling me that it didn't matter why. When I tried to make some notes during the lesson, she scolded me, saying that I mustn't think with my head. I had no idea what I was really doing. To make matters worse, kneeling for so long made my feet go numb and feel like they belonged to someone else. Sound familiar? A little later, she writes, "In this world, there are things that we understand immediately and things that take time to comprehend. Once is enough for the former type of experience. But things in the latter category reveal themselves to us only gradually, undergoing a slow metamorphosis over multiple encounters. And each time we understand a little more, we realize that we had only been seeing a tiny fragment of the whole. Tea is exactly like that." So Noriko goes every week to these tea lessons for years. Her cousin stops and she keeps going. And mistake after mistake, not understanding, but somehow she notices things just changing, softening, somehow opening. One day it's time for the tea lesson and it's a rainy day. And she thinks, don't want to get wet. I'll just skip it today. But instead she decides to go, and she starts off, gets to her lesson, and the rain comes harder and harder, eventually a total deluge. She writes, "All at once the deluge intensified. It felt as if Sensei's house was under a waterfall. In fact, it was rather frightening. With the shutters on the southerly side closed, but the rest open, the tea room was enveloped in a gloomy, peculiar atmosphere. I felt quite helpless in the face of that overwhelming noise. It reminded me of nights when a typhoon was raging outside. Despite my anxiety, it was oddly thrilling, and I suddenly felt a closer connection to everyone around me. The rain pounded the roof and windows, all but drowning out every other sound within the wooden house. The downpour was so loud that I could visualize it as clearly as if I could actually see the scene outside. Vapor spraying up from the black tiled roof like white steam. Muddy water splattering as it surged out through the spouting. All the foliage in the garden left bedraggled by the cloudburst. Fat raindrops bouncing off the broad leaves of the paper plant with a rattle like a fusillade of dried beans. Shining wet camellia leaves trembling slightly. The sodden drooping blades of the broadleaf bamboo. the young leaves of the grapevine under the eaves rustling as the deluge whipped them about, exposing their pale undersides. The whole garden wild with joy as the torrential rain washed over each and every leaf. Water cascading onto the eaves from the roof with a rat-tat-tat. Giant puddles with surfaces churning so hard in the rain they looked like fish scales. Cars throwing up spray as they drove along the road, its asphalt surface transformed into a river. I felt as if I could hear every single raindrop. It was something like listening to music, when you can identify each instrument from its timbre, bass drum, timpani, marimba, maracas, and it was interwoven with similar clusters of sound from further away, forming a magnificent, multi-layered symphony of rain. Never before had I listened so intently to the rain. I felt as though I was plunging into a jungle of torrential noise. My heart pounded. It was raw and terrifying, but I wanted to keep going, even deeper. I was nothing but a pair of ears. My hearing seemed to suddenly sharpen as I pushed past some kind of barrier. Huh? For a moment, my ears felt as though they were blocked. All at once, I was in a huge open space where silence reigned. Where was I? Nothing stood in my way. The strain of trying not to get the procedure wrong, my ever-present work worries, the chores waiting for me at home that day, it was all irrelevant. The nagging worry that I needed to make more effort, the anxiety that I might be worthless without approval from others, the fear of my weaknesses being exposed, it all vanished. I was incredibly free. I felt as if large, tepid raindrops were pelting down, stinging my skin. It was like I was squealing with childish delight as the downpour washed over me so powerfully that I could not open my eyes. I had never known such freedom before. My horizons stretched out forever. I had always been here. There was no need to go anywhere else. Nothing was forbidden. Nothing was compelled. Nothing was lacking. Just being was satisfaction in itself. The boundless horizon, stretching out forever. No need to go anywhere, do anything. Nothing lacking. Nothing at all. Just being, just sitting, just a living offering. Whole world sitting. So let's continue in this continuous practice with great gratitude for the circle of the way. Thank you for your practice, for listening. Thank you.